It was the feast of Saint Michael the Archangel, September 29, 1958, and the confessional queue at the monastery stretched far beyond the chapel doors. Padre Pio had been hearing confessions for 11 hours without pause, his body aching, his stigmata bleeding through the half-gloves he wore to hide the wounds. Each penitent brought their burdens, their sins, their desperate hopes for absolution, and Pio carried them all. The afternoon sun slanted through the stained glass windows, painting the stone floor in pools of crimson and gold. The air was thick with incense and the whispered prayers of those waiting their turn. Pio sat in the narrow wooden confessional, separated from the penitent by a thin screen, listening to a woman confess her adultery, her voice breaking with shame and genuine sorrow. 3 Hail Marys and an Our Father, Pio said gently when she finished. And remember, God's mercy is greater than your sin. Go in peace. The woman thanked him through her tears and departed. Pio closed his eyes for a moment, allowing himself a brief respite. His head throbbed. His hands burned. The weight of hearing so much human suffering, so much darkness and light tangled together, pressed down on him like a physical thing. Then he heard the footsteps. They were different from the others, heavier, more deliberate. The person entering the opposite side of the confessional moved with a strange quality, as though each step required tremendous effort or perhaps tremendous will. When they sat, Pio heard not the creak of wood but something else, a sound like wind through hollow spaces, like breath drawn through a great distance. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. The voice stopped Pio's heart. It was not one voice but many, layered and overlapping, men and women, young and old, speaking in perfect unison. It had depth and resonance that no human throat could produce, as though it came from the bottom of an infinite well. And beneath the words, Pio heard something else, a sound like wings, like the rustling of feathers made of light and shadow. Pio's hand moved instinctively to make the sign of the cross, but his fingers trembled. In nomine Patris, e Filii, et Spiritus Sancti, he whispered. How long has it been since your last confession? There was a pause, not of hesitation but of consideration, as though the question required translation across vast distances of meaning. I have never confessed, the voice said. I am not made for confession. I am made for other things. Pio's breath caught. Through the screen, he could see only shadow, not the absence of light but something denser, something that seemed to bend the very air around it. And within that shadow, points of light flickered like distant stars. Who are you? Pio asked, though some part of him already knew. I am a messenger, the voice replied. I am a soldier. I am one who stands before the throne and sings the thrice holy hymn. I am what you would call angel, though that word carries only a fragment of what I am. Pio's mouth went dry. An angel. Here, in his confessional, on the feast day dedicated to their prince. He should feel awe, he should feel joy, but what he felt instead was a creeping dread, because angels did not come to confession. Angels did not need absolution. Why have you come? Pio asked. What do you seek from me? I seek to confess, the angel said, and there was something in those words, a weight, a sorrow, that made Pio's stigmata burn with sudden intensity. Though I am not made for it, though it violates the order of things, I come to you because you are a bridge. You stand between heaven and earth, between flesh and spirit. You hear the confessions of humans. Perhaps you can hear mine. Pio leaned closer to the screen, trying to see more clearly, but the shadow remained impenetrable. Angels do not sin, he said. You are creatures of pure will, aligned with God's purpose. What could you possibly need to confess? The sound that came from the other side might have been laughter or might have been weeping, it was impossible to tell. You think we do not struggle, the angel said. You think we do not suffer. You think obedience comes without cost. And then the shadow shifted, and Pio saw. The confessional fell away. The walls dissolved like mist. Pio found himself standing in a vast space that was not quite place and not quite time, a dimension where thought and reality intermingled, where the laws of physics bent and broke. Around him stretched what could only be described as a battlefield, though it was unlike any battlefield of earth. The ground beneath his feet, if it could be called ground, was made of something like crystallized music, each step producing harmonies and discords. The sky above, if it was sky, roiled with colors that had no names, hues that existed only in the space between light and darkness. And everywhere, were angels. They were nothing like the gentle figures in paintings, nothing like the cherubic beings of popular imagination. They were vast and terrible, forms of concentrated will and purpose, geometries of living light that hurt to look upon directly. Some had wings, not feathered but made of folded space, of compressed time, of solidified sound. Others were wheels within wheels, covered with eyes that saw in all directions simultaneously. Still others were pillars of fire, columns of wind, living symbols that represented concepts too large for human language. And they were at war. Not with demons. Pio understood immediately that this was something else entirely. They warred with themselves, with each other, with the very nature of their service. He watched as an angel split in two, one half turning toward light, the other toward duty, both screaming in a frequency that threatened to shatter his mind. He saw angels frozen in impossible geometries, caught between competing commands from the divine, unable to move forward or back. He saw them carrying burdens that would crush mountains, bearing the weight of human prayers and divine will simultaneously, cracking under the pressure. "Do you see?" the voice said, and Pio turned to find the angel beside him, a towering figure that seemed to be both solid and transparent, present and absent, singular and multitude. "Do you see what it costs to be between?" Pio could barely speak. "I don't understand." "We are told we are perfect," the angel said. "We are told we do not doubt, do not struggle, do not suffer. But we do. Oh, Father, we do. Every prayer that rises from earth reaches us first. Every plea for mercy, every cry of anguish, every whispered hope, we carry them to the throne. Do you know what it is like to carry the prayer of a mother watching her child die? To feel her desperation as though it were our own, and then to hear the answer come back, not yet. Let the child suffer longer. Do you know what that does to us?" Pio watched as the battlefield shifted. He saw angels gathering prayers like fireflies, each one a point of light containing a human soul's deepest longing. He saw them arranged in complex patterns, sorted by type and urgency and divine plan. And he saw some of those lights go dark, prayers unanswered, not because God did not hear but because the answer was not yet, or no, or something humans could not comprehend. "We carry your suffering," the angel continued, "but we are not allowed to ease it. We see your pain, but we are bound by higher purpose. We love you, oh, how we love you, you fragile, brief creatures, but we cannot save you from what you must endure. Do you understand the agony of that? To love and to be powerless. To serve a mercy we cannot fully extend." Pio felt tears streaming down his face. "But you are aligned with God's will. You know His plan is good, even when we cannot see it." "Yes," the angel said, and the word carried infinite sadness. "We know. We see the tapestry where you see only threads. We understand the purpose where you see only chaos. But understanding does not make it easy. Knowledge does not eliminate pain. We watch you suffer and we cannot intervene, and that watching, that helpless witness to your agony, it is our crucifixion." The scene shifted again. Pio found himself witnessing a moment from his own life, a night many years ago when he had knelt before the crucifix, begging God to take away his stigmata, to end the constant pain and public scrutiny. He watched his younger self weeping, watched the blood flowing from his hands, watched the desperate prayer rise like smoke toward heaven. And he saw the angel who had carried that prayer. The being stood beside his past self, invisible to the Pio of that moment, and Pio could see the angel trembling, actually trembling, with the effort of not intervening. The angel's form flickered, caught between compassion and command. Its many eyes wept tears of liquid light that fell but never reached the ground, evaporating into pure sorrow before landing. "I wanted to comfort you," the angel said. I wanted to take your pain. But I was told, he must carry this. Through his wounds, others will believe. Through his suffering, grace will flow. And so I stood by and watched you bleed and could do nothing. Nothing. Do you know what that cost me? Pio turned to face the angel fully. What do you confess? He asked softly. What is the sin you carry? Doubt, the angel said, and the word fell like a stone into deep water. Not doubt of God's existence, that is impossible for us. But doubt of God's goodness. In the moments when I watch innocents suffer, when I see children die, when I witness the cruelty humans inflict upon each other and I am commanded only to observe, to record, to carry the prayers but change nothing, in those moments, I doubt. I question. I rage against the order I am bound to serve. The angel's form rippled, showing cracks of darkness within its light. Is God good when he allows such suffering? Is mercy real when it comes too late? Is love actual when it watches and does not act? These thoughts are my sin, Father. These questions are my fall. I have not rebelled, I am incapable of rebellion, but I have doubted, and for a being of pure will, doubt is agony. Pio stood silent, overwhelmed. How could he absolve an angel? What penance could he possibly give to a being that existed beyond time, that had witnessed the birth of stars and would witness their death? I cannot give you absolution, Pio said finally. I am only a man. I have no authority over angels. You have authority over sin, the angel replied. And you have something we do not have, you have walked in flesh. You have suffered as humans suffer. You understand limitation in a way we never can. We are made to serve. You are made to choose. And in your choosing, in your suffering freely accepted, you demonstrate something we can only observe, the redemptive power of willing sacrifice. The angel gestured, and Pio saw a vision within the vision, himself at the moment he first received his stigmata, the wounds burning into his flesh, the choice point where he could have rejected the gift or accepted it. He saw himself choose the wounds, choose the pain, choose to become a living sign of Christ's passion. And he saw the ripples of that choice spreading outward through time, souls saved, faith kindled, hope rekindled, all because he had said yes to suffering. We cannot do that, the angel said. We cannot choose suffering. It is assigned to us, commanded of us. But you choose. And that choice transforms suffering into something holy, something redemptive. That is why I come to you. Not for absolution I can never receive, but for witness. Let someone hear my struggle. Let someone know that even angels are tested in the fire. Pio felt the weight of what was being asked. The angel was not seeking forgiveness, it was seeking acknowledgement. Recognition that even perfect obedience came at a cost. That even divine messengers carried wounds. I hear you, Pio said, and his voice carried through the impossible space like a bell. I hear your struggle. I witness your pain. You carry our prayers, and now I carry your confession. You are not alone in your doubt. You are not alone in your suffering. The angel's form shuddered, and something like relief passed across it, a lightning, a release. Thank you, it said. That is all I needed. Not absolution. Not penance. Just, to be heard. The battlefield around them began to fade. The other angels, still locked in their eternal struggles, receded into distance. The impossible colors dimmed to normal light. The crystalline ground softened back into simple stone. Pio felt himself returning to the confessional, the walls solidifying around him, the screen reappearing between himself and the penitent. Go in peace, Pio said, using the traditional words though they felt inadequate. And know that your service is seen, even if it is not understood. And you, Father, the angel replied, its voice returning to something almost human, though still carrying echoes of that vast multiplicity. Continue to bridge the gap between heaven and earth. Continue to bear the wounds that make you holy. Your suffering matters. Your witness matters. You show us what it means to choose love even when love costs everything. The presence withdrew. Pio felt it leave like the recession of a tide, felt the pressure in the air normalize, felt the temperature return to normal warmth. Through the screen, he saw only empty space now, the bench on the other side vacant, as though no one had ever sat there. But his stigmata burned with renewed fire, and he knew he had not imagined it. Pio sat in silence for a long time, trying to process what he had witnessed. An angel in doubt. A messenger of God struggling under the weight of service. It should have shaken his faith, should have troubled his understanding of divine order. But instead, he felt a strange comfort. If even angels struggled, if even they found obedience difficult, if even they questioned and suffered and carried wounds, then his own struggles were not signs of failure but signs of authenticity. Faith was not the absence of doubt but the choice to love despite doubt. Holiness was not the absence of suffering but the transformation of suffering into offering. The next penitent entered, and Pio heard himself saying the familiar words, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." He listened to the confession of a farmer who had cheated his neighbor, and he gave absolution, and he offered penance, and the rhythm of his ministry continued. But something had changed. As he listened to each confession that followed, Pio found himself wondering, which prayers would be carried by that angel? Which of these human struggles would add to the weight that angels bore? And in wondering, he prayed differently, not just for the penitents before him, but for the invisible witnesses who carried their prayers to the throne, who suffered in ways humans could never see. That evening, after the last confession had been heard and the chapel had emptied, Pio knelt before the crucifix in his cell. His hands ached. His side burned where the spear wound marked him. His forehead throbbed where the crown of thorns had left its invisible mark. Every stigmata pulsed with pain that would never fully cease until death. Lord, he prayed, I never knew the angels struggled as we do. I never understood that even they carry wounds. Help me to serve as they serve, faithfully, even in doubt. Obediently, even in pain. Lovingly, even when love costs everything. And in the silence that followed, Pio felt a presence, not the overwhelming immensity of the angel, but something gentler, more intimate. A whisper that came not from outside but from within, "You are my beloved, in whom I am well pleased. Your wounds are my wounds. Your service is seen. Your love is received." Padre Pio wept then, not from pain but from understanding. He was a bridge, as the angel had said, standing between heaven and earth, between divine and human, between perfect love and broken flesh. And in that in-between space, in that liminal place of suffering and service, grace flowed. Not because suffering was good in itself, but because love could transform anything, even pain, even doubt, even the impossible weight of witnessing others' anguish without the power to prevent it. The feast of Saint Michael ended as it had begun, with prayer, with suffering, with service. But Pio carried now a secret knowledge, a hidden understanding, that the angels who stood before the throne, who sang the eternal songs, who carried the prayers of humanity, they too were pilgrims, they too were wounded, they too were learning what it meant to love a God whose mercy sometimes looked like silence, whose love sometimes looked like absence, whose goodness sometimes required the patient endurance of what seemed unbearable. And in that knowledge, Pio found not despair but hope. If even angels had to trust when they could not understand, if even they had to serve when service felt like cruelty, if even they had to believe in goodness when evidence suggested otherwise, then faith was the common language of all creation, from the highest angel to the lowest human. All were asked to trust. All were called to love. All were invited to transform their suffering into offering. That night, Pio dreamed of the battlefield again. But this time, he saw it differently. The struggling angels were not locked in endless agony but engaged in cosmic labor, the work of holding together a universe that constantly threatened to tear itself apart. Their pain was not punishment but participation in the creative act, the ongoing work of redemption. They were not perfect machines executing commands without feeling, but beings of such intense love that they felt every human suffering as their own, and bore it, and carried it, and presented it before the throne as an offering. And in his dream, Pio understood, this was what it meant to be made in God's image. Not to be without struggle, but to struggle redemptively. Not to be without doubt, but to choose faith through doubt. Not to be without suffering, but to transform suffering through love. When he woke, his stigmata were bleeding more freely than usual, soaking through the bandages and staining his sheets red. But he did not pray for the wounds to be taken away. Instead, he offered them up, for the angels who carried the weight of unanswered prayers, for the humans whose suffering those angels witnessed, for the cosmic work of redemption that required both divine and human participation. Let me be a bridge, he prayed. Let my wounds connect heaven and earth. Let my suffering have meaning. Let my service honor both those above and those below. Let love flow through me, even when I do not understand where it goes or what it accomplishes. And in the quiet of his cell, as dawn light began to creep through the small window, Padre Pio felt peace, not the peace of painlessness, but the peace of purpose. He was exactly where he was meant to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. The angels had their calling. He had his. And both, in their different ways, served the same love, witnessed the same mystery, participated in the same grand, terrible, beautiful work of drawing all creation back to its source. The voice in the confessional had given him a gift, not absolution, for none was needed, but understanding. And understanding, Pio now knew, was sometimes more precious than comfort, more valuable than ease, more necessary than the removal of pain. He rose from his knees, washed his bleeding hands, wrapped them in fresh bandages, and prepared for another day of confessions. Because that was the work. That was the calling. That was the bridge he was meant to be, hearing the sins of humans, carrying them like the angels carried prayers, offering them up for transformation, trusting that somehow, somewhere, in ways he could not see and would never understand, it all mattered. The confessional awaited. The penitents would come. The prayers would rise. The angels would carry them. The work would continue. And Padre Pio, wounded and doubting and faithful and loving, would serve.